Well, hello to all you retro gaming lovers out there, and welcome to yet another installment of Take It or Leave It. Previously, we've taken a look at the original Crash Bandicoot, and while I do have fun playing it every once in a while with its good level design, graphics, and music, I also would like to say that it was definitely in need for improvements, like the clunky controls, hit and miss boss fights, and ideas not feeling fully realized. Still a good time, but yeah, we can do better than this.
So let us continue the journey of playing and reviewing all of the Crash games.
Production on Crash 2 started only a month after the first game was done, and Naughty Dog was given 13 months to finish the game with the budget of $2 million. The idea that Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin and crew had was to listen to all of the complaints that consumers had with the first game and basically try to fix them and improve upon the previous installment. They also really wanted to properly take advantage of the original PlayStation hardware, and not only make Crash 2 look better, but essentially reinvent the engine from scratch. I'm telling you, they really wanted to make a new Crash game, not just another one.
That's basically the whole history of Crash 2 behind the scenes, believe it or not. Naughty Dog wanted to improve on the first game, but also take advantage of the PlayStation hardware. After that, Crash Bandicoot 2 was released on either October 31st or November 11th, 1997, because I wasn't really able to figure out whether or not IMDb or Wikipedia and fandom were right, so either date could be true. With that all said and done, this game ended up coming out barely over a year after the first one, which is pretty impressive. Needless to say, does that mean they succeeded? I wonder if I should spoil my opinion. Nah, I like creating tension. With all that out of the way, let's dive straight into Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back.
Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back. Press Start to begin.
Crash 2 picks right where Crash 1 left off. That is where the normal ending left off, not the secret ending. So, did Cortex actually die when you defeated him last time?
Well, if you read the subtitle of this game, I'm pretty sure you can figure that out. Crazy, I know.
Well, believe it or not, he lived! He somehow didn't die and fell in a cave and noticed something that might actually help him.
Crystals. Of course.
A year later, Cortex is seen with a new assistant and brand new main character, Engine. Where's Brio? Wait a minute, okay? Engine points out to Cortex that they don't have enough crystals to take over the world with their new space station called the Cortex Vortex. Which is literally the exact same name for the machine used to finish off Mutations from Crash 1 was called, but whatever. They don't have enough minions to collect the rest of the crystals either. This is when Cortex comes up with an idea. Meanwhile, Crash and another new mainstay, his sister Coco, are just chilling on the beach. But then Coco's laptop battery dies and asks Crash to go get her one. After wandering around the woods, Crash then gets abducted by Cortex and tries telling Crash to get crystals for him by lying about helping him save the world. Which is what you need to continue the game anyway. And then a character from the previous game shows up.
Of course. Dr. Nitrous Brioche.
This is not supposed to be a cameo either. So after the events of the first game, Brio and Cortex had a falling out, which is why we don't see him working with Cortex this time. And all of the enemies were sent by him to stop you from getting the crystals and instead encourage you to get the gems. As for Coco, she's not just seen in the intro. She actually also gives you hologram messages and essentially updates you on what she's finding out about Cortex and whether or not he's even telling the truth. And that's seen in the hub a lot. Messages from either Cortex or Coco until the end where Coco finds out that he was lying the whole time.
I have mixed feelings on Crash 2's story. On one hand, I do think it's cool to have a liar reveal type story. But on the other hand, the mystery was completely deleted the second the game was published.
Let's talk about the good stuff first. The characters are by far the best part. Cortex is simply so much better than he was in the first game. Not only does he have more screen time, but is also voiced way better than he was previously. Guess who voices him, by the way? Clancy Brown! If you don't know who else he voices, I'm sure this clip will help.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-chingery. Money, oh money, how I love thee. Cha-ching, cha-chong, cha-changaroo. From pennies to dollars, any amount will do.
Pretty cool, huh?
The new characters, Coco and Engine, are also awesome, along with all the other new boss characters that I'll talk about later on. Also, if you're wondering where the hell Tawna is, well, buckle up, because this story is interesting. As it turns out, Japan were not happy with Tawna's design, saying that they don't want a sexualized character in a children's game. So Naughty Dog just goes, fuck it, we'll just come up with a new character, and that's how Coco was put into the game. Speaking of, as much as I do like the new characters, they aren't as characterized as they are in later games, aside from Coco and Cortex, of course. The other good thing is, again, I like the idea that Naughty Dog was going with a story more mystery-based, but that's where the story gets messy. It's just crazy that the only thing they needed to do to make the reveal work is simply not show Cortex with the crystals or Engine. I feel like the intro would simply work better if it was presented like this.
Crash? Crash? Crash! My battery is fried. Make yourself useful, big brother, and bring an extra battery for me.
That way, it gets a newcomer to go, what's happened to Cortex? And literally every single hologram scene would actually create tension. But since they showed Cortex's plan right at the beginning of the game, along with the subtitle being Cortex Strikes Back, it makes every single hologram scene pointless. I feel if they just removed those two scenes, it would have made the story better.
Look, I wouldn't say the story is bad per se, but I'll give the first game this. It did a better job with getting its point across. In the sequel, I do see effort, but at the same time, it feels rushed. Also, one more thing, they did at least change the slight complaint I had in Crash 1 with how you have to wait for the opening cutscene to play, but now with Crash 2, they fixed it to having it play when you start the game. Nice improvement, makes more sense.
But like I said in the first game, I don't think that story is anywhere near as important as the rest of the package. So let's actually take a look at this game.
Crash 2 basically keeps all of the moves from the first game, jumping and spinning. However, now there is one button that creates, no joke, 7 moves. With it, you can slide, crouch, crawl, slide spin, slide jump, body slam, and if a ledge is too high or far from you, slide spin jump. All of these moves are simply a fantastic addition to the game and are fun to use and necessary for completion. That's not all too. You can also climb on monkey bars and control 3 different vehicles. I forgot to mention them in the first game, that being the 2 hog levels, and while they controlled stiff, I still think they're decently designed levels and fun. But in Crash 2, you got a jetboard, polar bear, and even a jetpack. One more thing is that unlike Crash 1, Crash 2 lets you use analog sticks since 1997 is when they really made a debut on the original PlayStation, and also to show Nintendo how to properly implement analog sticks onto a controller without it looking like dog shit.
Sadly, I did try to connect my PS3 controller to my PC, because just like last time, I play these games via emulator, but for as much as I tried, I just wasn't able to do that. I had no choice but to play the game with a fake Xbox 360 controller. However, I was able to figure out how to connect my PS3 controller to the PC long after my recording session was done, but it's something. So now I actually can show you a bit of what the movement looks like. Simply put, the Xbox 360 controller can't mimic the PS1's analog stick movement at all. Also, I always play this game with an analog stick, and I think it's better to use than the D-pad. Sue me. So the analog stick movement on an actual PS1 controller looks and feels less like this, and more like this.
The analog movement can also give you the capability to walk, but that's neither here nor there. I already said that the new moves are awesome, and the analog stick movement rocks. Also, with the new moves, I actually never use circle for any of them. I instead use R1, and I personally think that R1 is the better button to use for the new moves. It feels more responsive and more comfortable and reliable. But again, back to what I was building up to. I criticized the controls a lot in Crash 1, mainly the jumping. So, did they fix it?
You better believe it.
Yep, the controls are so much better. Jumping isn't a pain to use, it's responsive. If you stop moving in midair, Crash no longer carries momentum with him and flies off the fucking screen.
It's a goddamn Halloween or close to Thanksgiving miracle.
It's just insulting how much better the jumping in Crash 2 is compared to Crash 1. This improvement simply goes a long way. As for the vehicles, they're pretty fun too. The jetboard is my least favorite to control. It feels quite heavy and can make avoiding hazards a bit of a pain in the ass, but it's not bad. This game is also where Polar makes his debut, and his stages are also pretty much just the hog levels from Crash 1, but control way better and have a dash button. Lastly, you have the jetpack levels. These have a rather poor reputation to them, and I'm just gonna say it.
They're not that bad.
Don't get me wrong, they are a tad floaty to control, but I always enjoyed these levels. The ability to finally fly is fun, and I also think that these levels are pretty well designed. Get a grip. As for the monkey bars, they're fun. Yeah, that's about it.
Alright, we've seen enough with the controls here, so let's actually look at the gameplay.
First things first, the main collectibles. The crystals. They are in every main level in this game, and are required for progression. Don't get mad about that though, because the crystals are well handled. They are very easy to find, but they do a good job with trying to get the player to pay attention to the levels somewhat. Now let's talk about the crates. Just like the abilities, Crash 2 keeps all of the box types from Crash 1, but adds 3 more to the equation. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but invincibility felt more common in this game than in the first one.
Also, side note, I forgot to mention the checkpoint crates in the last video. Oops.
As for the 3 brand new crates, let us take a look. First, what might be the most iconic of the new additions is, of course, the Nitro crates. They're just straight up TNT on steroids. With TNT, they only explode if you either jump or spin or run into them while invincible. With Nitro, you better stay far away from them. Touch them once, boom! Second new crate is the Nitro crate switch. See, while you do need to avoid the green douchebags as much as possible, at the same time, you still need all of the boxes broken in order to get a gem, Nitro crates included. So, what better way to work around that than to just create a box to be at the end of each level that pretty much just destroys every single Nitro crate in the level. Be careful with boxes though, and what I mean by that is don't leave any boxes behind unless you see them explode. Yes, even if they are right next to the Nitro crate, unless they're not off screen, the Nitro crates will simply not blow up any boxes next to them if you use that switch. so just keep that in mind. Lastly, we got the sealed crates. Boxes covered with metal casing. How do we break them? By body slamming. However, they do feel a tad bit pace-breaking, sadly. I commend it for giving Crash's body slam a purpose, but every time I end up having to do this, I always just react like this.
Okay, let's keep going.
I feel like the body slam is a little too slow to use. It's not that big a deal though. What I do think is a bit of a deal is the fact that the line crates weren't changed. In the first game, you needed to bounce on them 10 fucking times for an exchange for 10 Wumpa Fruit. Pretty shitty deal, isn't it? Plus, it takes too long. But in the first game, you can still just skip those. In the sequel, however, it is nice that if you hold down the jump button, it reduces it to 8 bounces, but there are a couple of instances where I had to slowly bounce on one lined crate at a time, and it's so fucking slow. Sooner or Later is definitely the most guilty one of the bunch when it comes to this problem. Thankfully, you can reduce the bounces even more by just bouncing on them once and leaving the crate there for a few seconds, and then you can break them instantly, which is what I usually do when I would encounter one of these. So yeah, not that fun. But to go back to positivity, they did add in a box counter. It would be better if it was a tally, and they do show one at the end of each level if you didn't get the gem, but it's still a nice little improvement, especially when you are capable of memorizing the number of boxes like I can.
However, there is a very big improvement that I've been ignoring this whole time.
The gems and how much better they are handled in this game. In the previous game, they were a good idea for a reward for getting all of the boxes in each level, but the unfortunate thing is that you need to also break all of the boxes without dying past the first checkpoint. But in Crash 2, problem solved! It doesn't matter now. You can die as many times as you desire and still get the gem as long as you got all the boxes. Do I really need to explain how this system is so much better than the other? It makes conquering every level no longer stressful and actually very fun. Hooray! Also, remember how shit the depth perception in the first game was? Well, that's also been fixed. Now the camera is more panned down. You no longer have to blindly make judgments with Crash's landing space frequently anymore. The only levels in the game that do have slightly wonky camera placements are the Ruins levels, but even then, it's still not as bad as it can get in Crash 1.
But man, if only there was something else for completion in a handful of levels that do encourage me not to die, but only for halfway through and not the entirety. Oh wait, Crash 2 does have that.
Meet one of the best new additions for the Crash Bandicoot franchise, the Death Routes. The Death Routes, as their name implies, require you to not die before reaching them. If you succeed, you are taken to a challenging, yet fun, little alternate path, I guess you can say. Finish the route, you get rewarded with a gem. However, they are alternate paths, meaning that if you were going for all of the gems, you'd either need to backtrack or kill yourself. Depending on the level, of course. But still, this is a fantastic gameplay element. What about the colored gems? They make a grand return. In the first game, they were quite underwhelming. You got them the exact same way you got the other gems, but at least the idea of creating other alternate paths was solid. In Crash 2, the alternate paths idea is still there, but the way you get the colored gems is different and, in my opinion, more well executed. This time, you get them either via Death Route or Secrets. Then you backtrack to the uncompleted levels and finish them. Also, in the last level of the game, there is a brand new addition that I call the Ultimate Gem Marathon, where you complete routes from all of the other colored gems in the game and get rewarded with one of the 2 last gems, which is a great idea for a final level.
However, there is one other awesome new addition to Crash 2 that's one of my favorite things about Crash 2. The secrets.
In a handful of levels, there are these secrets that you can find that can either take you back to a previous level for you to complete, or give you one of the gems. Naughty Dog did a really good job with making each secret subtly hint you that there's something in these levels that's slightly off. For example, this odd staircase of nitro crates. Why are they like that? Why are they not creating sounds or bouncing up and down like the other nitro crates? Are they even real ones? Then, curiosity gets the better of you. There are great examples, but I'll be here all day. I will say this though, the one in Turtle Woods where you have to do the entire level without breaking any boxes is perhaps a little too cryptic. Still though, I fucking love the secrets in this game.
But if you watched my previous video and remembered the critiques I made towards the first Crash game, you were probably waiting for this one to happen sooner or later. The bonus rounds.
In the first game, they were shit. The boxes didn't count towards anything. They were attached to a pretty piss-poor save feature, and you only had to do the Cortex ones for completion. As for Tana and fucking Brioche, so consider me absolutely pleased to say that they also fixed the bonus rounds. The tokens are long gone now, and instead they are just platforms. Also, unlike in Crash 1, where you only have one shot with each bonus round, and if you fail, you'd have to reset the level, here, you can retry it as much as you'd like. And as for the bonus rounds in question, they're so much better. This time there is only one type, and not 3 anymore, and the boxes now count as a part of the level's box count, meaning that these boxes are also required. So yeah, bonus rounds actually have completion purpose to them, and are also no longer attached to a shoddy save feature. Which leads us on to the next improvement, which is the save feature. The first game was not accurate enough and didn't save your exact position, not to mention the stipulations in order to even have the capability to save. But just like everything else, that's also fixed. No more dumb stipulations, and no more inaccuracies with saving your position. Just come up to this gap in the warp room and you can save your game. Lastly, for the gameplay segment, are enemies. They expanded on them a lot more and also make more of an advantage of your moves, like ones that require the slide move, along with a wider variety like spiked turtles, mice, more lab assistants, whereas in the first game they only had one type, birds, moles, Sonic, and more. So yeah, even the enemies are better.
Now, what about the level design? In Crash 1, it was probably the best part about that game. In Crash 2, it's even better.
I'm being serious when I say that it's so good that there is not a single level that I wouldn't even say is average. I mean, all of these level themes are just perfect. But before we get into some of the most masterfully designed levels in the sequel, let's first talk about the Warp Room. In Crash 1, the hub world was 3 islands, and it did a rather good job with making you feel like you're slowly but surely getting to Cortex Castle. In Crash 2, it's replaced with the Warp Room, and instead of you being locked in one direction, here you can freely walk around and are given 5 levels to go in. There are 25 levels in the game, 27 if you include Totally Bear and Totally Fly, and there are 5 different warp rooms, and yes, you still need to play all the levels and grab the crystal in order to keep going. People usually consider this as a lesser way for progression, but I think that this style of progression is as good as Crash 1's style, through completely different reasons. The reason why I think this is, yes, it doesn't make you feel like you are reaching a destination anymore, but I like it because it instead feels like you're going on a mission and traveling all around the world. Plus, though I always do them in order anyway, I do still like the idea of having a whole batch of levels given to you every time you travel to a new warp room. Now that I'm finally done explaining that, now let's talk about the levels themselves. There are so many awesome ones with different theming: the woods, snowy areas, swamps, and space. The boulder chasing levels from 1 have been expanded, with more aggressive music, speed boosts, and later on, electric fences to slide under. The snow levels are just pure masterclass in platforming design, and I used to hate the ice physics, but now I find them to be ridiculously fun, especially for times where you get to be invincible and be able to go really fucking fast. Cold Hard Crash is also such an incredible challenge to get right, and so much fun once you do get it right. The space levels are so much fun too, along with the few levels with the fireflies where they are the light of your life. Literally. I don't know what else to say other than Crash Bandicoot 2's level design is absolutely phenomenal.
It's just too fucking bad that the boss fights are the only vaguely major thing not improved from the first game.
Okay, let's just talk about these hits and misses, shall we? Boss 1 is Ripperoo. He makes his grand return to make TNT and Nitro Crates for you to avoid. It does seem very tense, but once you actually figure out the patterns, with that being TNT first and Nitro second, you can do this with ease. And no, that's not a bad thing at all, because this boss fight is good. Compared to Papu Papu and Ripperoo's own debut, Ripper here does a much better job with actually trying to get the player to properly pay attention. Sure, it is a lot of waiting, but it's still the first boss, okay? Cut it some slack. Boss 2, on the other hand, is fucking awful. The Komodo brothers only have 2 attacks. Spin one brother all over the place, and the other brother mindlessly and aimlessly throwing knives around the arena. Then you can simply avoid those knives by standing completely still on the opposite side. Scary. God, this boss fight is shit. Luckily, Boss 3, in my unpopular opinion, is the best one in the game. Tiny Tiger. It's basically a more refined and more fun and fast-paced version of Ripperoo from 1. There are 9 platforms to jump on as Tiny follows your every move. But eventually, some of the platforms fall down, and then you have to lure Tiny into the gaps where the platforms used to be. It's so simple in concept, but so satisfying in execution. Boss 4, Engine. This is typically seen as the best boss in the game, but I really don't agree. I like that you have to slowly take his robot down with Wumpa Fruit. In concept, that sounds both genius and hilarious. But I just think it drags on for far too long and has too many phases.
But what about the final boss with Cortex? I mean, he had the best boss fight in the original Crash Bandicoot, so maybe, for the second time, he can end the boss fights on a good note. Right? What the fuck? What the hell, Crash 2? You can't just be this amazing all this time and hit me with that.
I feel like the footage spoke for itself there. I mean, what else can I say about Crash 2's final boss fight that other people haven't? It's lazily designed, it's disappointing, and it's easily the worst Crash boss fight ever made.
I don't mean that lightly, by the way. This boss fight is genuinely terrible. Very disappointing.
But whatever, because now it's time to talk about those graphics Naughty Dog worked so hard on. Like I said in the beginning of this video, Naughty Dog worked really hard on the graphics in particular, and really attempted to push the PlayStation 1 to its limits. So, did they succeed? Well, of course they did. Look at it. Just like practically everything else, the visuals are even better. Not only is there more variety with the visuals, but more detail too. They went as far as to have Crash's breath visible in the snow levels, make footprints, and even ice reflections. Those are at least the noteworthy things. Another thing that I completely didn't mention in the last video was death animations. In Crash 1, they were charming. In Crash 2, there's more kinds of ways to die, thanks to more enemies, and some are actually funny. So yeah, the visuals are even better than 1. Who would have thunk it? Now for the music. I praised Joshua Mansell's very good performance in the first game, so good thing that Joshua came back for the sequel, and what do you know, the soundtrack is also even better. In fact, I'll just let the music speak for itself because it really is that good. The soundtrack is more bombastic and upbeat. It's less atmospheric and more cartoonish, which is definitely more in line with the tone anyway. Crash 1's soundtrack is still really good, but Crash 2's is more fitting for its genre in my opinion. Almost every track here slaps. I would say that the ones that I'm the least fond of are the bonus room, / death route, / gem path ones. They're not bad at all, still good, but sound less exciting than the main level's music. Crash 2's OST is something to really admire here.
So, now that I've spent this whole video talking about this game, now it's time for me to tell you what happens when you complete the game 100%.
I expressed thoroughly that Crash 1's hidden ending was not worth it in the slightest, especially when the canon ending is the default one anyway. Here, Naughty Dog made the right choice in having the canon ending being the secret one instead, and the default one being a cliffhanger telling you that the Cortex Vortex is still operating. Rather than 26 gems, we got 42 gems. So the task for completion is even bigger. So, did they actually manage to make the secret ending worth it this time? I'd say so.
We are ready, Crash. Would you like to do the honors?
Sure, it is short, But it's still very satisfying to see all of the gems you worked really hard to get turned into a laser and finally seeing Cortex's plan completely thwarted. So yeah, though nowadays you can easily find this ending on YouTube, at the end of the day, this came out in 1997, long before YouTube existed. So put into that context, I think it's worth it. So that has to do it with all of my thoughts and feelings on Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back.
I absolutely love this game, and I consider it to be one of my favorite platformers out there.
I highly recommend this game to anyone that's just getting into platformers. The leap that this game makes from its older brother is outright fucking mind-blowing. Crash 1 is definitely a decent start, but Crash 2 not only fixes one's problems, but destroys the previous game in almost every way. From the gameplay, to the music, to the level design, and the graphics, this game is so good that it makes the first game look kinda bad. Sure, the story is a tad bit messy, and the final boss is just insulting, but that means absolutely goddamn nothing when just about everything else is practically perfect. On the scale of quality, I'm giving Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back a 9 out of 10. Take it.
So that's the end of today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I will be uploading more frequently, by the way. I was waiting for a long time to wait for my PC to arrive, and now that it has, I can finally get back to making videos again. I also got a microphone, if you couldn't tell. So, am I going to be making a Crash 3 review next? No. I'm going to take a detour to look at 2 other PS1 classics, and then take a look at Crash 3. What are these PS1 classics? You'll find out. This was Max Rabbit you just watched. See you on the other side.